Welcome once again to another edition of Quoth the Raven, Louis Bright Raven. I'm your host, Louis Bright Raven, 30-year veteran writer, illustrator, and editor of comics, science fiction, fantasy, horror, and role-playing games. And today's question comes from David in Florida. And he asks, recently on Comics with Perch, he was talking about how $1 comics would be a benefit to the comics industry. Would you agree with his opinion on that? Why or why not? Well, to be more specific, yesterday or the day before, Perch had a video where someone had asked him, could a Marvel or a DC do a $1 comics line reprinting the classic Marvel and DC stories like they've done with the True Believers or the dollar comics that are specific one-shot issues of specific classic storylines? Could they do that with a regular ongoing series at $1 a book and get an audience? And Perch was pretty much on board with that potential. And theoretically speaking, I agree with him as well. But historically, that has not always proven to be the case. Marvel in the past has always had, not always, but throughout the 80s and early 90s, had reprint books like classic X-Men and Marvel Tales featuring Spider-Man, where they reprinted the classic storylines side by side with the regular ongoing current storylines. And they were moderately successful for a good 10 years. They were not cheaper than the regular books. They were just reprint books. And there's nothing wrong with that. And we've also seen in more recent times where Marvel and DC have tried to do different lines at a little bit cheaper than their regular book lines. In the 90s, Marvel had a 99-cent line in 95 and 96 that lasted about a year and a half. Didn't do very well. We'll talk about why in a little bit. And of course, in the 2000s, Marvel tried again with the Marvel Adventures line, which originally was a little bit cheaper than the regular ongoing books and then became the same price as the regular ongoing books. Again, not necessarily the biggest hit, but they weren't misses necessarily either. We'll talk about that as well. Monster Fan says hello. Hell Raven. Hope all is well. I hope you're doing well too. The key, however, is that while we can do cheaper books on newsprint and do reprints, and we can do standalone titles at a lesser price point, what people need to remember is that lower priced books give retailers less of a return on the sale. They're not going to get as much profit per unit. And as a standalone title, or even a series of titles, they're not going to be as enthused, I guess you could say. They've kind of brainwashed, if you will, to sell the regular ongoing brands like Batman and X-Men, Superman, and so forth, that are going to be an obstacle that has to be overcome. You have to retrain the publisher and the retailers to make them understand that if you're going to do a $1 line or a $1.50 line or $1.99 line, whatever, a cheaper line than the standard books, you have to make them your primary entry-level books, and you have to market them as such. Otherwise, they're only going to last for a very short amount of time, and we haven't ever really marketed them correctly when we've tried them in more recent years. When we had back in the 80s, when we did books like the Marvel Tales line and the classic X-Men line, they were marketed a certain way so that they would be successful. We haven't done that in the modern era. So if we're going to do it, it can be done, but it has to be, the mentality of both the publishers and the retailers have to be in simpatico with one another to market it correctly so that it can be successful. So that's part one. But let's go back and talk a little bit about what has been attempted in the past. In 95 and 96, Marvel did do a 99-cent line. The most popular line of that, popular book of that line was Kurt Busiek and Patrick Ola's Untold Tales of Spider-Man, which I believe lasted about 2.5 years for about 30 or 36 issues, if I remember correctly. They also had an Avengers book. They had an X-Men Origins book that kind of did modern retellings of the classic X-Men in one-shot stories of the origins of the characters. And these books were generally done by lesser-known writers or editors who were writing stories and lesser-known artists. They were treated as basically tertiary books. That means they're like the third level down on the marketing scale. And as such, a lot of retailers and fans alike overlooked them, whether they were good or bad or indifferent to the quality. They just didn't really market these books so that anybody was really paying attention to them. And unfortunately, even though Busiek and Olaf did a really nice job on their Spider-Man title, it's kind of like an overlooked past gem, and the other ones are completely just forgotten they were ever even done. Then we had the Marvel Adventures line. Now, if John Norris were around, he would tell you how much he loved the Marvel Adventures line. He was a big fan of that run. I was not quite as enthused when those were coming out, but I respected them for what they were. It was an open line that was geared more towards a youthful audience. And there's Mark waving and giving me a thumbs up. Thank you. That a lot of the stories were standalone or maybe 2 issues. And again, they didn't have necessarily their top name writers and artists associated. They had a lot of younger up and coming talent associated with those books. And even though they were $1 cheaper than the mainstream books, a lot of retailers weren't marketing those books to be successful as lead-ins for younger readers like they should have been. And so they only lasted again about another maybe 2.5 years before that line kind of went away. IDW picked it up, tried to relaunch it. It's never really been very successful for IDW. It's going away again. It's that kind of a situation. Now, the True Believers line, like I said, in more recent times, you guys have probably gone to a comic shop and seen a reprint of Thor 337, the first appearance of Beta Ray Bill, for $1. Or you've seen $1 comics with Swamp Thing on Mars, and he has a different body composition that was done, or something like that. Those are individual issues that are really cool stories, and that's great. And that's a great way for retailers to get younger readers into your back issue bins, your 50-cent bins, your dollar bins. And that would be a great way to get those kids into those classic X-Men, into those old Marvel Tales books, because that's where you're going to find them a lot of the time. But you're not necessarily going to get them into modern-day comic reading because they don't necessarily sync up. So if you're going to do that, you have to have 2 different areas of thought. Do you want to get your new readers into buying back issues as collectors or just as readers to give them a sense of history of the characters, or do you want them to just be into the modern stuff? If you want them to be just in the modern stuff, then the publishers need to create, for lack of a better word, a modern Marvel universe, a modern DC universe. If I was going to go Marvel, I would go with the cinematic style character versions and maybe a little bit of the newer characters that have been brought out, like Ms. Marvel, I can't think of which race she is, but the one that's kind of got the scroll powers with the elastic arm and fist and stuff, that's getting a new TV series. That character. I would focus on Miles Morales instead of Peter Parker. I would do a lot of things of that nature. to get them interested in the newer generation of characters rather than get them into the older. But if you want them to have a sense of history, then you've got to gear your characters and your readership to the more affordable, cheaper back issues. And that's when you want to go to have what these back issue dollar books, True Believers and stuff are really geared for, in my opinion. And yes, you can possibly get them interested in buying a trade collection, and that'll help you and bring some dollars into your store, of course. But remember, you want to get younger kids interested in comics. Kids don't have $15, $20, $30 for a trade paperback or a hardcover. So you want to get them into back issues, and you've got to find your back issue books at an affordable price point that they can afford so that they can get a number of books to that. Another person, Dave also mentioned to me, rather, not another person, about Alterna and the Alterna Comics line, which was brought in a couple years ago by Peter Simeti and his $1.50 line, $1.50 line. And was that a success? It was and it wasn't. It ran through a lot of similar problems with Diamond and with retailers, a lot of resistance. Again, he didn't have big names with the books. There was nothing inherently wrong with those books. They were certainly worth $1.50 for what they were. And you can still go get them through Indiegogo today and get sets of them. Every so often he sells them that way. Or you can go on alternacomics.com and back order stuff. But it's not readily available through Diamond or through comic book shops because, again, like I said earlier, a lot of retailers are kind of hesitant and resistant to having the cheaper book in their store because they're afraid that if they buy that cheaper book that doesn't give them as much profit per unit, they're not going to make as much money, or they're not going to get the people to buy the higher dollar item. They'll switch over from the $3.99 to the $1.50, and they're losing money is the way they're looking at it. You have to break them of that mentality and teach retailers how to build audiences for younger audiences, go cheaper, intermediate as they get older into college and adulthood, and they have a little more spending cash as they're getting jobs. And then those of us who are older, we're collectors, we're been around for 20, 30 years, we've built up some savings, whatever. We're the ones that you target those big dollar items for. Okay. But you can't do a $40, $50 trade paperback hardcover that collects 900 pages of book and expect a parent of a 12-year-old to buy that for them. You got to give them something a little more affordable. And I think that's what Perch was trying to drive at was, yes, we could do that, and Marvel and DC have that option, and that should be something that they're looking to do. And I totally understand where he's coming from because as a former retailer, that's how he thinks. He would be one of those type of retailers that would market that kind of product to a younger audience. But he is kind of an aberration, in my opinion, on that. Again, most retailers I've seen seem to be a little more resistant to that. Until we can train and break that cycle, I don't know if we can really make that a success. But that, I think, is the key to the success of such a presentation. Now, I know a lot of people have asked me about the Alterna books in the past, and could independent creators in general do what Peter Simeti's doing? Yeah, they could. A lot of creators could, but a lot of them are doing the $10, $15 specialty boutique publishing books, largely because the numbers of who's ordering these books aren't large enough to sustain the dollar level. If you're going to have a $1, $1.50, $1.95 sustainable level, you're going to have quite a large number of backers or supporters to buy. I don't know. Let me see if I can find Alterna. Indiegogo. Let's see. Spring 22. All right. Their current one. We're just going to do a quick stop screen here and share. This is their most recent Indiegogo. You're only getting 5 issues and a giant issue for $15. There is a bundle, and you can also build your own bundle, and you can get dozens of different add-ons. But you can see they've only got 346 backers. And to really be successful, even though you've got 6 books here, 2 Unit 44s, Wolf and Batsy, Tinseltown, Downcast, and Mr. Crypt and Friends. Or you can build your own bundle, which gives you accents, or you can buy each one of these books separately if you want. But again, these are only like $2 a book. And this, of course, isn't including shipping and handling. The shipping and handling is going to probably cost more than the books. And that's part of the reason why it hasn't been done more consistently with this system. If we're going to do that, I would rather see people, instead of selling a single issue, I would rather see you guys do a subscription to 6 issues for one campaign. Like you're buying a subscription to 6 issues for $15 plus shipping, and you're going to ship it 6 times, so you got to balance your shipping and costs and everything into whatever you're going to charge for it. But if you can do that, and you can get a number of books like that, you can build a potential audience base that's going to get you the prices back down to the $1 to $2.25 range per issue, and still have a quality product. Now, as far as getting creators to do it, I think there's a lot of people who are veteran, established, former Marvel, former DC creators out there who have been trying to do independent comics through Diamond, haven't really gone anywhere, have tried to go through Kickstarter, through Indiegogo, and we're not doing them in a newsprint to keep them that cheap. They're all doing the boutique publishing because that seems to be where the market is pushing towards. But if you were to do this and get enough product and go back to the old system of what we had when Marvel and DC regularly had subscriber mail order subscription service through an Indiegogo, through a Kickstarter, if you had retailers that were willing to commit to this level of product for a set number of issues and sustain it at that number. In other words, most retailers will order like 10 copies of number 1, and then they'll order 7 copies of number 2, 6 copies of number 3, 5 copies of number 4 by the time number 1 comes out, and they don't really know what their sales are because they have to order before the books come in. You got to have retailers who are willing to commit to a set number, say 8 copies, and they're going to push those 8 copies and sell those 8 copies out each and every single issue if they can. You got to have that kind of drive in your retail community to sustain that. Once you've got that, then you can build. It's not going to come overnight, but you can build it. We haven't really taught our retailers how to do that since Diamond monopolized the market in Marvel went to Heroes World. A lot of retailers have lost that knowledge. Because we didn't have Carol Kalish, who used to be the former sales manager and marketing person for Marvel anymore. We don't have a lot of people who are really going into the stores and communicating with our retail communities to teach them that. So these are the sort of things that we would have to address and get corrected to make these type of things work, and not just through Marvel or DC, but through Alterna or any level of publisher. But if we could do that, I do believe that, yes, you could have a successful thing and bring prices back down. Now, the question then becomes, are you going to then force the regular books, your regular Marvel, DC titles to come down with it? Probably not. What it'll probably be is you'll have an entry-level line of product for a certain price that gets you into the basics of the universe, and then for more advanced stages of readership and collectability, you'll go a little bit higher priced. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that would actually justify more publishers putting out more titles featuring the same characters. I think it would be able to justify hiring more writers and artists that way. And you could actually teach your writers and artists and develop them properly, rather than what they're doing today in the comics market, which is a lot of times either going through a talent portal and going through a specific creator who then basically hands them over and gives them jobs, kind of like Scott Snyder and all of his proteges have gotten work out of his college writing class. Or you get a lot of talent pool raids where you might see me or Dan Votto or Ed Dukeshire at Digital Webbing or some other guys out there helping develop and building stuff in the small press. And then here comes CB Cebulski and Tom Brevoort at Marvel, or Jim Lee at DC, or Eric Stevenson at Image, or somebody else. They see this talent they like, and then they go approach them and take them away and say, hey, look who we discovered, who we made them. And that's been a problem in the industry as well. So I think if we did it that way with these companies, you could build tiers and people would still make a living across the platforms a lot easier. And you wouldn't see the same writers working at Marvel, DC, Image, Dark Horse, Valiant, IDW, Boom, all at the same time, as well as writing film, television, video games, etc. And you wouldn't see the same artists or art styles as much, I don't think, if this was done. So that's pretty much all I have to say on this. I hope that it made sense, and that I answered the question well enough. But later this afternoon, hopefully, I'll be able to come back with some reviews. I wasn't here yesterday because we had really bad storms and my internet was knocked out for most of the day. Monster Fan, I did get your email. I did respond to you a little while ago. Hopefully, we can discuss possible stuff to do together on the channel later. And that's all for now, I think. So let me go ahead and whoops, something isn't right. What's going on? Okay, there it is. So if you have a it's sharing the wrong screen. That's why. So if you have a question for me for a future episode, contact me at quotheravenlbr72@gmail.com. Subject QTR Q&A. And if you liked this video, or you think others might like this video, I'd appreciate it if you would hit the subscribe. Well, it's not showing this. It's not showing the screen right today. I think it's my computer. Hold on a second. There we go. All right. Hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons to continue to get content like this from my channel. As always, I thank you for watching and for your support. Hopefully, again, I'll be back later this afternoon with some reviews. But until then, or if I'm not back this afternoon, I'll hopefully be back tomorrow with another question, and we'll talk some more. In the meantime, stay safe and have a great day. If you want to reach me on social media, at Facebook, Lewis.BrightRaven, Twitter at LewisBrightRave2, DeviantArt.com/BrightRavens, where you can find some of my artwork. You've been watching Quoth the Raven, Lewis Bright Raven exclusively on YouTube. Again, if you have questions, comments, you want to commission artwork, Quoth the Raven LBR72 at gmail.com is the address to reach me at. You can't get a hold of me there within a reasonable amount of time, say 24 hours, try lewisbrightraven at yahoo.com as a backup. That's all for now. We'll catch you next time. Have a great day.